Are lawyers in Singapore okay? Because a new study says not really. The recently released Anthro Law Salt Legal Profession Sustainability Study found that lawyers in private practice face incivility and bullying on top of a tough work culture. For some, that means battling strict deadlines, being on call 24/7 for bosses, getting scolded and belittled by senior colleagues, and facing harsh interactions with some members of the judiciary. Now, many report feeling burnt out or anxious and struggling with their mental health. That's kind of the gist of it, but it's raising some concern among the fraternity, especially because these issues are causing lawyers, in particular junior ones, to leave or consider other types of roles. Now, these issues are not new, but this study is getting some attention. MPs have even asked Parliament about it. So, what happens now? I'm Natasha, and welcome to another episode of The Usual Place, the podcast where we have real conversations about the headlines. Joining me today are two lawyers at very different points in their career. So let me introduce them. First, I have Zhang Yu Fu, a junior lawyer at Dentons Rodyk. Now, you were called to the bar in April, so you're now officially getting the full lawyering experience. And on the other thing you do on the side is you're a content creator, and you document on social media your journey as a lawyer and other parts of your life as well. Welcome to The Usual Place, Yu Fu.
Thank you.
And next to you on the couch, I have Wong Yi. And Wong Yi, you're currently the General Counsel for construction company Lam Chung Holdings. And let me do a quick highlights reel of your past. So you were called to the bar in 2011.
Yep.
You worked for one of Singapore's big four law firms. You were the chairman of the Young Lawyers Committee for the Law Society of Singapore, or Law SOC as we call it, for about 5 years. And you're also currently the vice president of the Singapore Corporate Counsel Association, which looks out for in-house lawyers. And that's
right.
not all in your career. I mean, you've basically seen the profession from many angles and you've still stayed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Hi,
thank you
everyone.
for
Yep.
being here. So lots to dissect about the study. But one of the things I got from reading it is that it's not a new problem. It's kind of like decades old, right? So I want to find out, maybe from you, Wong Yi, first, why has nothing changed if these issues surfaced previously?
So I think when the Anthro report first came out, great job, kudos to Isaac and his team and the people who had the willpower to see through it from start to end, from the various stakeholders.
Yeah, because it was a 4-year study,
Yeah,
right?
4-year studies. And one of the more interesting and more curt comments I got from some of my peers were that it took them 4 years to come out with this. Like we all knew this. So the point is, it's not about the length of time it took, but we all knew this. And as you rightly alluded to just now, when I was heading up the Young Lawyers Committee, we tried to initiate certain studies under the previous leadership at Law Society as well, with my co-chair and the rest of the Young Lawyers Committee. We gave some feedback, but I think it's a matter of timing, technology, as well as the whole macro sphere that was in question. So timing, that was 2017 to 2020 when we first started it. Times are still, a lot of things have changed, not just because of COVID, but over the past 10 years. In terms of technology, we were doing it on our own. We didn't have the help and the expertise that Isaac and his team at Anthro had. And also, I think why it took so long, because there were a lot of stakeholders involved, and we wanted, and I think it's good now that we go beyond the perfunctory sort of reasons that, young lawyers leave because they simply want a work-life balance, they're burning out, because really the reality on the ground turns out to be a lot different from what was just widely being reported and swept under the carpet. So I think it's about time. It's good that the soul searching can begin now with this this report being published, and a lot of people can look at themselves and say, hey, I identify certain aspects which has affected my decision to leave or to stay, or I was actually one of those who perpetuated certain, behaviors in the past, and what can go on better from here.
Okay, so we'll get into your anecdotes in a bit, but I want to ask you for this bit, because maybe some of the feedback that has come out, maybe from older lawyers, could be that whatever I've mentioned earlier in the introduction was that all these things like workplace bullying, the long hours and the harsh comments and everything, this is really just a rite of passage for newbies. Basically, everybody goes through it, and whoever survives gets the payoff later on in their career. And if you as a young lawyer can't take it, then you're just a strawberry. I mean, Yu Fu, as a young person, what do you say to that?
I guess my response to that would be, what's so wrong with being a strawberry? I guess, inherent in that question, this is a strawberry generation. There's that connotation that maybe this generation is more easily affected, hurt by things like words. And I think that is kind of the sensing that we get from our senior lawyers. But I guess my question would be, as someone who's fresh into this profession, I just got qualified this year. Where does that come from? The fact that we are affected very deeply by the behavior and actions of our senior lawyers. Where does that come from? And I think it comes from a place of care and concern and hope for the profession and what we expect. I don't think it's wrong to have those expectations, and fairly speaking, I don't think they're very high expectations, but I think it's because the younger generation do wish for a profession that is truly prestigious and honorable in that sense. And that includes things like respecting the associates, having a dignified career, being treated well, and have bosses very simply who care about your welfare. So I think that would be my response.
So you think this behavior is not kosher with your generation?
Yeah, I think with my generation, we have expectations of how we should be treated in the workplace, and it boils down to very basic empathy and just being treated decently. And I don't think this is unique to our profession. I think it applies across all professions. It's just that maybe we don't really see it being translated at our workplace.
So I want to ask Wong Yi, why did your generation tolerate this? I mean, just for some context, you guys are about, I want to say 15 years apart, if my math is correct, around there. So
probably.
you basically put up with some of the issues that were raised in the study, which I encourage everyone to read, because as someone who's not in the law profession, it was very, very shocking to, you guys help people, fight to defend them and everything. Why are you all yelling, throwing files? But Wong Yi, tell me about your experience with the law firms that you've been with.
Yeah, first and foremost, if I can add on to what Yu Fu has has said, I think it's also important. It's not just a generation's hope per se. I think even if I were to sound altruistic about it, right, if there's a lack of good legal minds and professional service providers from the legal front in society, right, the administration of justice gets impacted. You don't have good lawyers, the whole justice system will be impacted. So it's actually not something that just affects so-called the strawberry generation, but something that even the seniors need to think about, because, overall for the bigger good, for Singapore's sake, if you like, the administration of justice will be short-handed if people do leave, and this kind of toxic culture, as what the study has alluded to, persists. So for myself, interesting examples. I lived through it. I think sometimes as I was thinking back, it's easier with hindsight, and also on hindsight with hindsight, and also when you are out of it. I give examples. So one anecdote for me personally was when I was a junior, I was told to print a document for a senior associate in the firm. And so I asked her, should I print it double-sided or single-sided, as some partners prefer to review documents in a single-sided way so that they don't have to flip, they can just slide the paper off. So I was told, and I remember this till today because it's quite funny to me, to print it in love paper mode.
Okay, what is love paper mode?
Exactly. So if I if I was as inquisitive a mind as a journalist would be, I should have asked. So, obviously one would assume, I think it was late at night, maybe 10 o'clock, in the evening. So one would assume to print it double-sided, which I duly did. And then I was told off for that. Apparently, love paper mode, in her words, were to be A5, I think 2 pages on one side of the paper, double-sided. So looking back clearly, and I burst out laughing, and she was actually shocked why I didn't burst out in tears, but in laughter. Because to me, it was clearly a setup. Whatever I had done, if I asked too much, I would have been chided for asking too much. Whatever I'd done, whether I printed it double-sided or otherwise, let's be honest, it was a setup. So these things happen. And looking back, all these small insidious acts of workplace bullying, they kind of add up. But at that point in time, or even now, if somebody goes through the same thing, comes to me for advice, I will be like, it sucks to be in that position. But what do? You don't go to MOM, you don't go to TADEP or, NTUC for this help. You don't even go to your boss because it's something so seemingly innocuous, but it adds up. It chips at your confidence if you're not resilient enough as a person. So that's the other important thing to young lawyers and young people in general. Build up your resilience. your innermost resilience and self-esteem, then bullies find it harder to get to you.
But I kind of agree with you Fu, here because I don't think that this is behavior, whether it's in the law fraternity or not, that they should be subject to these kind of things. I mean, you turn up at work not expecting to be yelled at, baseline. That's the baseline expectation, which I think is okay. So I'm kind of curious, like, why seniors in the law fraternity actually act this way? Is it like a trigger point? Are they also being pressured? I mean...
So I think there's some generational transmission or trauma as well. They were treated that way. They only knew one way to, through their training and, the pupillage days, back in the days, what they call it. They only knew one way to be trained, which was like sheer obedience. To be a role model, you just listen to your partner, listen to the boss. And then also feedback loops were very difficult back then. Like I said, even the Love Papermo incident, right? If this associate or this partner who's perpetuating or, silently acquiescing to such behavior is a top biller in the firm. Law firms are just in their businesses of legal services. Partners are business people. They sell legal services. The associates and the juniors do the work, right? So if somebody's a top biller, why would another partner in the firm step in? Unless it's too obvious, it ruins a reputation. Back then, no such things. Reputations were built purely on the lawsuits you won, the kind of names that you had in the corporate world, and all these bad behavior were always swept under the carpet as the cost of high performance. Something's got to give, right? Like F1 cars are fast, but, it pollutes the environment. Something's got to give. So that was the mentality then that people put up with. And people are very protective of their of their turf as well. Like if I've got this very high billing partner beside me, but she's got a habit of throwing files and stuff, but she brings in money for the firm. It gets me, my new material possession. So why would I sacrifice her because of the whims and fancies of a so-called strawberry generation junior that I don't care about, that's going to leave anyway, a couple of years' time. So that's probably the thinking. I may be wrong, but that's probably the thinking. It's easier to avoid it than to tackle the problem head on. And also, I feel back then as well, the matrix for determining what's a good lawyer, at least from the firm's perspective, was how much you could bill, how hard you worked, and the optics of it, and not so much, how well you treat your secretary, who's seen to be dispensable. Yeah.
Yu Fu, did you know any of this in law school before you joined the profession, or even before you decided to be a lawyer? Did you know any of this?
I think before I joined the profession, this like how prevalent it would be, like let's say toxic workplace culture. I don't think I had imagined it would be to this extent. We do, hear in law school here and there about maybe instances of bullying in the workplace, but I guess for me, I always thought it was one-off or, once maybe one black sheep in a firm, that kind of situation. But
it didn't put you off like continuing your journey as a lawyer?
It didn't put me off because I guess I was more optimistic, and I hoped that if I found the right firm and the right team, I would be able to, stay away from these issues. But coming into the profession, I realized that just speaking to the peers and the friends around me, it's more prevalent than we have imagined. And I might be lucky myself in the sense that I have a great team and I do enjoy working with my bosses, and they do care about my welfare. The reality of the issue is the peers around you and the people around you, they do face these issues. And when that happens, you see your peers fall out of the race one by one. It's very common to hear friends who say, oh, I will be tendering in a few months. And that's shocking to me because we're barely qualified and we're barely 1 foot in the game. But that is also scary in a sense because you see that the friends that you come in with, they will not be around in 10 years' time. And it becomes increasingly isolating. And if we want to be a part of a profession that should be a community, then surely we would hope for our peers to stay with us in this profession. So I think the sustainability of this career is an important question to tackle at this point before most of the younger lawyers drop out.
So what I'm getting is actually the law fraternity is kind of small. You guys know each other. I mean, when we sat down earlier, within 2 seconds, you all knew like 6 degrees of separation, we figured that out, right? So surely word gets around about certain lawyers' behavior and how they treat juniors, perhaps. If you get assigned to work with one of them, then how?
So in the unfortunate scenario where you have to be assigned with, let's say, a boss who mistreats their associates, right? In that situation, you would, share these instances and experiences with your friends. But whether I would go around sharing very candidly with a new face, with another intern, with someone who I'm not close to, I think that's a very different story. And that also boils into the fact that, let's say we do internships during our law school, and that's supposedly an entrance and an insight into what being in the law firm is like. But that's not entirely representative of the realities of working very closely with the senior lawyers. Internships are 3 to 4 weeks long. They're not an extended period of time. So I don't think interns get to see a very accurate reflection of.
And are you quite far removed from maybe senior figures in the law firm?
Yeah, and because interns, let's say the work that's being delegated might not be so closely related to the real work that you do as a lawyer. Let's say we do more of proofreading or more minor tasks like that. So I feel that that connection, that close connection, and working closely with a senior lawyer might not be there. And that's why a lot of law students might not have that sensing of how it's actually like working in that team or working in that law firm.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this boils down to workplace culture and changing human behavior. Because as Wong Yi, as you mentioned, there are big earners who bring in, or star lawyers who bring in a lot of money for the firms. And there are also firms that have, young lawyers who are lining up to join them, right? So what is the incentive for terrible bosses, or even, as I mentioned, some people in the judiciary, to change?
So, yeah, I think like what Yu Fu alluded to as well. I personally believe that people quit bosses, they don't quit jobs or companies, right? Because it's the person that you work with and interact with every day that that makes you feel the way you feel for 8 hours a day. Number two, yeah, like what you said as well, Natasha, I think it's fools rush in the leaky bucket analogy that if I'm from a top tier international law firm, for example, a Wall Street law firm and a Magic Circle firm, I've heard stories from more than one friend of mine, personal friend, partners throw files at them. They get impatient, they throw files at them. Even a stapler was thrown at one of my friends, he dodged it. So, yeah, but to him,
yes,
it's like...
that's the right reaction. We were just it's terrible.
And fools rush in because international law firms pay maybe double the associate salary, even though you do more than 2% work, so it's actually not worth it. Let me tell you this. But, okay, jokes aside, and the calculations personally aside, yeah, fools rush in. My friend quits and people are lining up to take the job because even recruiters will be selling, hey, you want to go to this Magic Circle firm, it's going to look great on your CV, go there, and this partner may be known to be difficult, but just sit there, squat there for 2 years. You can go anywhere after that. You can go to the investment bank to be their investment banking counsel after that, blah, blah, blah.
Did you call them a Magic Circle firm? Is that what it is? What does that mean?
So these are like the big four in the UK, the Magic Circle firms, or like a Wall Street law firm, or like a big 3 consulting firm, or big 4 accounting firm. So there are some bands of law firms that are so-called the bigger ones. And there are procedures for their brand name's sake. And obviously, the quality of work that comes out of these firms are supposedly good as well. I wouldn't say better, but good at the very least. And so they attract a certain kind of talent that wants to put it on their CV. So yeah, literally it's a leaky bucket argument that people go, people come, and the partners may not care because I know she's not going to stay with me for another 20 years. So I just treat her as dispensable, just get the maximum out of what I can get from her in terms of her research, her hours, her billings, and so on and so forth. And that's why there's no incentive for me to change because it has worked for me. So,
but don't they also want to train people? So if you keep starting, because you're starting from ground zero again when you have a new person come in, right? So why do they want to not have the person stay on for at least 5-6 years and groom them?
So for some, that could be the generational trauma being handed down kind of thing because they were trained that way. So they look up, hey, it has worked. I've taken over my retiring partner's books because I tolerated his abusive behavior, his toxic name calling, his sarcastic comments, and so on and so forth, his micromanaging, and so on and so forth. So it's worked. So I'm going to do this. And if this person stays with me long enough, when I want to retire, call it a day, I'll hand over my clients or my P&L, my books to Yu Fu, for example, right? But I wouldn't know, or I wouldn't empathize, or I wouldn't put myself in the shoes to say, hey, is this what this current generation looks for? To wait 20 years for your clients to become mine, to wait for the equity stake, or basically to is that what a young person really wants? Some of them don't bother to move with the times, or to kind of like pick up the nuances and the signs that are being sent out. So until this study comes along, it really kind of like pricks the skin and sees blood.
Do you think there's a particular change in today's work culture that is making people pay attention to these problems now? Is it perhaps we have younger people like Yu Fu's generation who is like, nope, I'm not going to stand for this at all? Like, what is the change that you think will actually move the needle on this study?
I think for me, the kind of change that would make a difference would be the senior lawyers perhaps extending more empathy towards the associates and trying to genuinely take a step forward to understand the issue at hand. And I think I've spoken to quite a few senior lawyers, and I think my peers will say the same, but I don't think there is a genuine understanding of the issue. We can have reports that come out, and we can have surveys, and we can do all these things. But I think it really boils down at the end of the day, do you truly understand, and do you hear us? Do you hear the issues and concerns that we have? Are you reaching out, and can we meet in between? I think there needs to be some form of open discussion and dialogue between the older and the younger lawyers to bridge that gap that we have. And right now, I think the report also says in itself that it's difficult for the younger generation to raise and voice out these concerns in a very open setting and to not be afraid of repercussions, because quite frankly speaking, there are probably consequences to voicing out these thoughts. And like you mentioned, it's a very small industry. It's everyone knows each other in some sense, especially, let's say, the senior lawyers. They went to law school together, they're friends, they run in the same circles. So it is difficult, and there's a real consequence to, let's say, stepping on someone's shoes or offending someone. And that's why I think we see the solution is very all or nothing. It's either I quit law entirely or I stay for the many years and plow through the years. So where is that in between? And ideally we can come to a point whereby we create a safe environment for the younger lawyers to speak out. And also that's only possible if on the receiving end we see some willingness to understand the situation.
So what I'm hearing, based on what both of you have said, is that young lawyers want a particular way of, they want to change it up, right? But hearing from you, Wong Yi, is they're kind of, senior lawyers are used to this way of working because this is how they were trained. Is there some sort of generation gap going on here that, can they come together?
So actually, I think
consensus?
I like Yu Fu's suggestion about something middle ground. I think I'm not going to promote coming in-house, but basically, no, but the point about in-house is this, right? Like the study is focused on lawyers who left the legal profession, i.e. the numbers are there. It's easy to quantify it, that you don't renew a practicing certificate. So the numbers are all there, literally to the singular lawyer. A lot of lawyers leave. They either leave the profession or they come in-house, become like in the legal department of a company. So then segueing back to your point about culture as well. If you're in a company, it's probably a little bit easier to speak up if the company on a whole has a very robust HR ombudsman sort of program. So let's say you're getting bullied by a line manager, you can raise it to HR. There are some anonymous anti-reprisal sort of things in place, which probably, with all due respect, lacks in law firms nowadays. Like I said, because law firms are run by law partners, their friends, and rightfully so, because they are the ones who bring in the business, so they have a say in the business. But let's say you're working at an in-house team in a big company, MNC or whatever it is, even in a local company, there's a proper channel. You can feedback to HR. There could be the proper protection, anti-repercussions, or whatever you call it, might be in place. So that's one thing, but ultimately it also depends. If a senior lawyer behaves in a certain way, has certain traits and certain outlooks about how life and work should be, if he goes in-house, he goes to head up a legal department in-house and he behaves the same way, it's going to be the same for people who are going to suffer under him. But the good news is he might get managed out by the CFO, the CEO, or even HR. And I've seen that happen before, that certain lawyers get managed out by their companies for workplace bullying. And not just one place, this same person was managed out twice in succession because of probably complaints against him at the workplace for micromanaging and just toxic behavior. So that's the good news about it. But I think, like what Yu Fu said, I think willingness, obviously, I can't speak for everybody. For myself, I'm totally open. I've got 2 young daughters as well, and I think it's important to treat everybody with respect, with empathy, like she said. But I think if I can just add on this point as well, it works both ways, right? So nowadays, why the tension has become very all or nothing, become very binary, is because on one hand, you have people who are behaving in really dubious ways as seniors. But on the other hand, I do hear feedback and anecdotes as well about juniors who react to feedback in a different way. So I'll give you an example, a real life example. Let's say a piece of work comes to me, I review it, and I give certain comments on how this can be improved upon. Genuine comments. I'm not talking about nitpicking and all that stuff, right? In the past, we would just go, oh, thanks, and then you revise the draft, send it back to the partner. Nowadays, you do hear stories that the juniors or the trainees would actually just reply, oops, as in OOPS, oops, So I'm okay in the sense that I look at it, I'll be like, wow, okay, generational gap lah. Maybe that's their way of saying thank you.
Wait, what would they say in the past?
In the past, if it's me, if my boss tells me, hey, can you amend this paragraph to, whatever, I'll just say, oh, okay, thanks. Even if I agree, don't agree, I'll just say, can we have a discussion? If I agree, I'll say thanks and I'll just change it. But now people go around with, oops. It's a bit casual, it's a bit informal. I don't know, maybe that's the new generation that I myself don't understand. But I think it's a give and take lah. Like you say, this is okay because I heard it. But can you imagine somebody who's a very straight jacket, kind of a senior lawyer and sees, oops, I think the associate is going to be called for a meeting the very next day. I think people react differently to situations, both the juniors and the seniors, right? Seniors may be, totally aghast at certain kind of behavior and reactions, whereas juniors also may react very differently to bullying and stuff. So I think it's a conversation is important, like what you said.
Wait, can I point out something here? So the senior lawyers will be annoyed if a young person says oops, but then they are like, let me throw a file at you and a stapler after that.
They probably won't throw it.
It's like,
okay, to be fair, I think looking back, I think it's quite funny. I think a senior lawyer might not even know how to react. This is like completely a totally different, not metaverse or universe, whatever you call it, but it's so like I wouldn't think my seniors would know how to react. They'd probably be so like, wow, how do I react?
Let me ask you, do you reply with oops and trigger some people?
I've never replied oops to my boss, but let's say between me and a senior associate, and if we're close, and we work together very closely.
Yeah, that's different, of course.
Yeah, we're like pals.
Yeah, that
like,
is okay.
Oops,
But this is like, somebody who's context.
Who's a partner. So I guess then it's also about the hierarchy in a firm, right? Which is that there's some level of respect and formality that, maybe is expected when you interact, if a trainee interacts with like a senior partner or a partner, it cannot be too casual, like what you mentioned.
Yeah, but I agree. I think there must be a balance. So even my time, I don't know whether when she was called, this has happened. So it's quite well known in the Supreme Court of Singapore. Certain judges have very strict decorum, right? Like you got to wear ties that are of a somber color, which can only mean black or like super dark blue, I think. It cannot even be dark red or something, if memory serves me right, from what I hear from people, right? And then I think certain judges also were well known to prefer people to drink in court, not from bottles, but bottles poured into glass cups and from a straw.
It's a very posh courtroom.
That's very posh, yeah. So, I get it. The younger generation nowadays, people just tap out their food bag, right? They pack their food bag, they eat it from the packet. And some of the older generation, the grandmothers be like, wow, can you at least plate it? It looks terrible. They're eating from a packet. You're not a beggar, you're home. So things like that, I think, is it a generational gap? Yes. Is it that consequential? Probably not. But I think if you can have a conversation to say, why I expect this, and can just have a chat. And sometimes you can agree to disagree. You can agree to disagree, but at least you see the other person's point of view. But I think when stories like that are being spread, it doesn't help the cause. People feel more alienated from the judiciary, for example, to know that, hey, there are judges like that. And obviously law school you got to be politically correct. How do you expect a law lecturer to teach the year fours, right? To say, hey, you know, when you go to practice, if you're going to litigation, look out for these things. I mean, it's almost like you're mocking or like you know, trying to troll the judge, right? But I mean, for better, for worse, for right, for wrong, he or she has the right to insist on certain protocols. It's his or her courtroom. But I think these are things that actually the judiciary needs to really, or the young lawyers need to really look hard within themselves, soul search and think, you know, where are my boundaries? You know, can I just give in a little bit, like you say, meet in the middle? Yeah, so that make it a better place for everyone. It's not binary. It's not, you know, a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Yeah.
So I asked Yu Fu earlier, but I wanted to ask you, Wong Yi, as well. So what is it about today's work culture that has changed? I mean, you kind of like mentioned it, but how would you characterize the change in today's work culture that has making people pay attention to these problems now?
So I think also a couple of things. I think nowadays, technology has really, really flown off leaps and bounds. You know, just 2-3 years ago, you're talking about ChatGPT. Now you're talking about, you know, agentic AI and stuff like that. So it really moves every day. So just to give context, I don't know whether it still happens now. When I was a trainee lawyer, there were still lawyers that type with 2 fingers, you know, like this. Okay, no judgment, not laughing, but these are people that, can you imagine, I don't know whether he or she, bless her or him, if they're still in practice now, how will you expect them to react to technology and stuff like that? So these are people that would like type with 2 fingers, they'll go to the office at 7 after a round of golf, read their papers, the hard copy papers, obviously not the digital ones. You know, so things like that, they won't change because it's work for them, and you don't expect somebody in their age and stage of life to want to change for the sake of, you know, fitting in and stuff like that. So I think and also when I read the intro report, the part about the judiciary having certain expectations, I think Singapore prides itself as you know, on our exceptionalism. You know, we're very efficient. We don't have like court backlogs for like decades or even centuries, well known in other common law countries. But I think instead of like rushing for the registrar to rush even pregnant lawyers to quickly not extend deadlines and submit their submissions and, you know, stuff like that, they could either leverage more on technology. I don't know how to do it, but I'm just thinking out loud. Or just really take a step back and just relax a bit. I think a 1 or 2 week deferment, it doesn't really move the needle, to my mind, you know, in the bigger scheme of things. So I think that has to really go as well. I mean, we are exceptional, but I think we have become a victim of our success in terms of wanting to be efficient, to make money, you know, to move things along quickly. And we are chasing things that we kind of lost sight of, the kind of byproduct and the side damage.
They didn't even give chance to the mom. Well, I mean, in the report,
study, right?
Someone shared an anecdote, right, that she was pregnant and she was going to give birth, and then she couldn't move the deadline at all because the court said no. Basically, it was like, too bad, your problem.
And then my time, I don't know whether you heard this story before. There were female partners who were touted, you know, to be fair, they were not boasting on their own accord, but they were touted by the firm as, you know, role models we should follow, because they were giving birth and reviewing prospectuses while giving birth. So back then, you were, for lack of a better way of saying this, and I'm not mocking anybody here, but this is not like the Russian gulag, you know. You're touting the strongest workhorse, the political prisoner who carried the most bricks to the kiln in that day. You know, and as a dad now, you know, I didn't give birth to a giraffe, you know, who needs to look out for lions and look for food the moment she popped, you know. So I don't see it as any measure of pride. I think it's not strawberry generation for sure, but it's just different people, different mindsets nowadays. It's not being woke, but I think we should put perspectives in context, right? Like, this shouldn't be touted as anything good. And as a client now, from a general counsel perspective, right, as a client, right, I give legal work to like people like Yu Fu, right? I don't take pride in making a team turn around legal advice for me over the weekend. And in fact, I actively and proactively tell the lawyers that I instruct that this is the deadline, it's 2 weeks from now, don't rush it. I mean, unless it's exceptionally urgent, which does happen now and then, but, you know, it's not a kind of a high-strung environment that I appreciate the lawyers churning out their work, because I know who's the one who's going to be suffering. You know, it wouldn't be the partner who's treating me for lunch, giving me mooncakes, inviting me to golf, but you'll be the associate that's going to leave if this kind of unsustainable, the right word she used, environment is being perpetuated. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, the law stock has actually done quite a fair amount to kind of deal with the industry's problems. So there's like a workplace harassment resource guide, and then there was a guidance notice that they actually put out last year to help law practitioners and legal practitioners prevent workplace harassment and bullying. So there are tools that exist, kind of. And so, but the study kind of implies that nothing much has changed. I mean, Yu Fu, as a young person, there are resources available. Why do you think it's not being used, or the culture still persists?
I think because at the end of the day, the issue still persists. Like, we can have guidances and notes, but these are not binding. These are not law, and there are no. While these are suggestions that have been made, I'm not sure if they provide real consequences to actions that we see in the workplace. And it's ironic because law is a legal profession, and our senior lawyers, the lawyers. So I mean, the one thing that that's etched in our mind is, these are not binding. These are soft. These are not hard and fast rules. And I think, like what Wong Hee has mentioned, law is a business. It's a service industry. Everything it's transactional in that sense. That's how the industry is. But if we view the law as a profession, if we view the law as a business, then on the flip side of it, what we'll see is also if associates do not enter the career with if their needs are not being met, and if they feel like there are better options elsewhere in other industries, it is also their choice and prerogative to leave the industry as well. It's the same market and demand and supply idea. It's a free market at the end of the day. So if we do see the law as a business, then at the same time, our senior lawyers need to accept that there is a free market, and younger lawyers may choose to exit if they wish, and if there are better options elsewhere. Now, whether the issue lies with which generation and all that, I think that's a lot of finger pointing. But if the goal and intention is to retain younger lawyers, is to retain lawyers in this profession who stay and accumulate experience along the way, then I think we need to begin to see some change, at least in terms of having a willingness to commit to better welfare for the younger lawyers.
So I think a lot of people watching this episode, looking from the outside looking in on this industry, and they'll probably have this question. Lawyers are some of the best paid professionals in Singapore. So Wong Yi, why should anyone care about the attrition rate of lawyers or what lawyers are going through?
So as I mentioned right at the start as well, I think if I were to take a very altruistic and macro view, right, the attrition rate of lawyers will make the administration of justice more difficult when you have not enough lawyers, right? Traditionally, then lawyers get overworked. And then basically, it's a vicious cycle. So at some point, you need to cut it. And I think the point about lawyers being well paid as well, I think it works both ways. Well, it's good. It gives you a comfortable material life. It attracts the so-called brighter talents to want to go to law school, to become a lawyer. But it also makes you want to protect your turf, number one, when you sort of have made it. And number two, it makes you, if you don't have very strong and healthy self-esteem, you may place all your pride on the fact that you got into law school, you're a lawyer, and it makes you very warped, very arrogant, and you end up being a toxic boss, because it comes from that sort of a sense of a wrongly placed sense of pride, I guess. So I think, like what she said as well, law is an honorable and honorable profession. It should always be. But all these kind of honor must come really truly why it's honorable, right? You're not just lip service, you're helping people, you're doing pro bono stuff, but really because it's honorable because you can help, you're in a position that you can help others, and not because I can make a lot of money, and therefore, with money I can behave in a certain way that I want to behave. So that's the wrong kind of mindset. And also, I think at the end of the day, I also advise young lawyers, right, that if you leave the profession, that's okay, because at the end of the day, your job is a means to an end. The end is your life. Whatever you want to be, right? You want to be a full-time content creator, you want to be a yoga instructor, you want to be a full-time triathlete, by all means do it, or a musician, right? It shouldn't let you define, you shouldn't let the work bog you down and define what you are. But that said, I'm not discouraging resilience. But I don't believe in the old school kind of trading, right? To be able to tolerate being shouted at for 4 years and then I get automatically lockstep promoted to partner. I don't think that's resilience. I mean, I do triathlons, right? We can talk about resilience in a different podcast, but that's not resilience. That's just the old school, suck it up, squat there. Because there were not enough lawyers in the past, in the 90s, in the 2000s. If you just squat there for 7 years, you become a partner by default. And then, it's not the right kind of mindset. People have options, like she said. That's why people want to leave. And at the same time, this brain drain is a problem for the legal profession, because you're losing your people, not for reasons that should be the ones that are driving people out of the profession. You're losing people because they're getting abused. because it's more the push factors than the pull factors. If you're telling me that going to big data, to AI and all that is a pull factor because it pays better, then so be it. We just have to up our game. It's simple to solve that problem. You pay lawyers more. But because lawyers are being pushed out because of push factors, that's where the Antro report comes in. We need to really look at it and see and solve the problem at the root of it.
Actually, I just wanted to jump on that. So, Mogi, you mentioned that because some of the lawyers have been through this toxic culture, so they think that, okay, this is the rite of passage, and then, so in the same way, you also have to suffer towards the next generation. I think that's a common mentality that I see, that, we suffered, so why not you? But I guess from a younger generation's point of view, the question would be, why can't we do better? And why do we have to perpetuate that kind of mentality? And if change can start somewhere, then maybe this is the time for change.
No, personally, I always feel you need to break it at our generation. Certain things, right? Like I said, it's not an excuse or even a justification for certain types of behavior. And I think suffering. I mean, like I said, there's a fine line between being through it and then. So. Okay, let's put it this way. There's a fine line. What I'm trying to say is, I don't bear any grudges. I'm a very positive and resilient person in general towards people who have sort of bullied or tried to bully me in the past. In fact, I thank them because they showed me, I learned something from them. I learned what I should not be as a boss now. I learned what I should not be. At the same time, if you've got a good mentor, you're lucky, then you learn what you should be, or you can mold your management skills towards that way. But I think, yeah, it's terrible to use this as an excuse conveniently to say, okay, in army Hokkien terms, my sergeant tekan me, I'm going to tekan my recruits. There's no excuse. And I think we should do better. I think the study also should really, I'm hopeful. I think Minister Edwin Tong is a great mind. Him together with Chief Justice Menon, who's also another great mind. If they can come together and really give the direction, set the political will, if you like, and the judicial will to come out with a study, and what they say, they're going to look into their report and really do some soul searching and put in place certain, I don't know whether it's moral markers or guidelines or actual steps that can actually address these issues that the younger ones face. So it can be done. I mean, for me personally, I have broken out of this generational trauma long ago.
You have left. But I do want to ask you, Fu, because you are the next generation of lawyers that you're being trained to be in this field for a while. So I want to end off where I started which is this issue has been going on for 30 years. And now, young lawyers are contributing to a survey like this and saying, no, we don't want to stand for this. Are you optimistic that anything will change? And on your part specifically, would you change, for example, we were talking about money, right? Would you take a lower pay? Would you take a lower salary so that you can establish boundaries or, and get a safer workplace as a lawyer, young lawyer, yeah?
For the first question, whether I'm optimistic, whether there will be change, I would say that unfortunately, I don't think I'm that optimistic because, as we know, the report doesn't show a finding that's new to us.
Yes.
It's a long-standing issue, and there hasn't been change. But if the committee can put their foot down and instill some real change, and there are real consequences to the actions of toxic work culture, then that might be a good place to start. But I would also say that for the second question, whether we would take a pay cut, for example, to go to a place with better work environment, I think that's to me that's a bit sad, because why do we have to take a pay cut in order to be in a place where we're respected and we have proper work-life balance and we have boundaries and we are dignified, we perform our work in a dignified way? I think that maybe the baseline should be that we should be fairly remunerated for our job as a lawyer, but also at the same time set those expectations that we should be treated fairly. I think that's the starting point. But the unfortunate reality is that in the industry that we're at, we have to unfortunately take a pay cut in order to go to somewhere that's supposedly better. But whether that should be the case, I don't think so. And I do hope that, in a few years' time, that things will change and the norm would be for people to be remunerated well and also at the same time treated fairly at the workplace.
Right. So to sum it all up, I'm hearing both your sides, and I think what you were saying is that empathy and decency are like basic things in like a workplace, right? And it shouldn't be unique to lawyers. Just FYI, other industries
dignity
too.
is universal,
yes,
right?
Yes,
Whether
we
you're
should
a key
have this.
lady or your associate or your
Yeah.
senior counsel.
And even outside the industry, whether
It's
you're
common
in
sense, it's not nothing to do
journalism
with
or
law, yeah.
advertising, it should just be basic
correct.
decency,
It's
right?
quite bizarre why some lawyers don't get it, but anyway.
But yes, and going to your points, basically you were saying that a lot of this bad behavior is generational transfer, and now is the time to break out of all of this. So I want to thank you both for being here and sharing your insights. And that's it from The Usual Place today. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. If you have thoughts on what we just discussed, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I will see you next Thursday.